Hi guys, welcome to the graveyard shift after lunch. So it's our job to keep you awake, I think, for the next half an hour. So I've brought a glamorous assistant to help me with that job today. So my name's Jen Williams. I work for a company called Secarma. We've got a lovely big purple stand downstairs. You can't miss us. So if you do think of any really challenging questions that I won't be able to answer in public, please do come and speak to us. We're a really friendly, helpful bunch. So yeah, come and say hi and ask any questions that you feel you need to, and we'll do our best to answer them. First of all, big thank you to Jason for joining me at very short notice. But Jason works for IASME, who you'll probably best know for administering the Cyber Essentials scheme. So Jason can answer all the questions on that. But he also, more importantly for you guys, runs the IoT scheme at IASME. So all the challenging questions go that way, all the easy questions go this way. I'm also going to ask you not to wander in front of the slides because you are tall. But for people stood at the back, this is essentially a podcast because I'm quite short. Okay, so a little bit about what we do. Secarma and IASME are related in a way, not structurally or organisationally, but we do have a working relationship. So it might be worth starting on the IASME side of the page. So IASME run the Cyber Essentials scheme, the IoT cyber scheme, and they've also got another selection of certification schemes that they own and administer. They are supported by a network of certification bodies who actually conduct the assessments against those schemes and issue the certificates. So Jason always jokes that we do the work, they get the money. That's kind of how it works. So Secarma, outside of being an IASME certification body, we also work with all kinds of businesses to support them on their cybersecurity journey. Most recently, we've started to work a lot more with manufacturers through our work on the IASME IoT scheme. So we are cybersecurity specialists. We happen to know a little bit about this industry through our work with IASME. Was there anything I've missed that you wanted to add?
Not that I can think of that you've particularly missed, but obviously on that previous slide, she says about the other schemes that IASME offer. We're also the delivery partner for the National Cybersecurity Centre's incident exercising and incident response. We also have a cybersecurity scheme which looks after maritime organisations such as ships and super yachts. And we also have our cyber assurance scheme, which is an information security management system, very similar to 27001. But yes, Cyber Essentials is the biggest thing that we do. And then personally, the IoT cyber scheme is also very, very important. And it's something that I'm involved in day to day. And that's my day job, is running that scheme, whether that's looking after new certifications, our network of certification bodies, looking for more manufacturers to join the scheme, looking for more work. But with them, and we also work really closely with DCIT, OPSS, and are really involved in sort of highlighting and bringing PSTI and the sort of legislative side to manufacturers and making people aware of that, because we still find, don't we, within industry, PSTI and legislation is so. People bury their heads in the sand, don't want to look at it, don't want to think about it, and actually these are the people that need to look at it and need to think about it. So we try to, very friendly way and a very nice way, say, come on, we need to have a conversation about this.
So when I was asked to do a talk today, I decided I wanted to talk to you about one of my pet peeves. Because it's something I can speak passionately about. And one of my pet peeves in this industry at the moment is how we handle supply chain security. And I came up with this topic from being asked by a customer of ours to fill in a 200-page vendor selection questionnaire where I had to give details of all of our policies, all of our processes, all of our Tuesday evening habits.
Do you need a soapbox?
Oh, gosh, yeah. It was horrendous, and I just thought there's got to be a better way to do this. We're doing it the wrong way. So then I thought, actually, why is supply chain such a risk? And I started digging into some of the stories that were in the media recently. Now, supply chain's such a risk because for every level of supplier, you have so many more other suppliers that support them. And when I'm thinking about this from a data protection point of view, you've got your data controller, your data processors, and then you have to know who the sub-processors are and their sub-processors. Now, that applies to cybersecurity as well. if you've got a business which you're trying to protect from the bad guys, your IT provider, who I'm sure is a very trusted partner of yours, who actually has the keys to your kingdom, if you like, they're going to have numerous other suppliers. So they're going to have cloud providers. They're probably going to have consultants working for them. They're probably going to have accountants. They're probably going to have SaaS solutions everywhere. And actually, then it starts to become a really complicated picture. So it's not an easy area of security to manage. I also thought about these two organizations, which I'm sure you'll have heard of in the media, or maybe you haven't actually. So who's heard of the Swissport attack? There we go, we've got one person's heard of the Swissport attack. What if I told you that Swissport attack actually impacted British Airways? Who heard of the British Airways hack a few years ago where thousands and thousands of customers had their credit card data stolen? And I'm trying to make a point here, I'll get to it eventually, I promise. SSCL, who heard of the breach that happened to SSCL? You did.
I mean, SSCL were who paid my wages prior to me working in cybersecurity, so yes.
Okay, so maybe you did then, you've got a unique perspective. But not many people know that SSCL suffered a cyber attack, which meant that people whose wages they paid actually had their personal HR data leaked. But actually, the main body who was impacted by that breach was the Ministry of Defence. So the point I'm trying to make here is your suppliers can impact your reputation through their poor security just as much as your own security practices can impact your reputation. Now, if you're a connected device manufacturer or a manufacturer of any service at all where you need your customers to trust your service, you have to really look at your supply chain as much as you would look at your own business in terms of how they're looking after your data and how they're impacting your reputation. Because actually, it's not your IT provider or your cloud platform that's going to stand up in front of the media or stand up in front of your customers and explain what happened to your data. It's you guys. So yeah, this becomes really important. I heard a talk recently where, I love this quote, I'm going to keep this one forever. So cybersecurity is just the act of mitigating risks that exist because somebody else did a bad job of designing something. So that's why we're employed as cybersecurity professionals, so I want to keep that. Another reason why in this industry you should be thinking about your supply chain risk is around your obligations under PSTI. Jason, this might be a really good one for you to cover, given that you're our PSTI expert, but why is PSTI so important in terms of supply chain risk? So, yes, we know it applies to manufacturers, but what happens if you're using IoT products or you're selling them on to other customers?
Okay, so hands up, who's actually heard of and knows what PSTI is? Yes, John, we know that you have. Put your hand down. But for anybody else, PSTI stands for the Product Security Telecommunications Infrastructure Act. Now, the government spent a lot of time naming that so that it really rolls off the tongue, so that everybody, can really get to grips with saying it. However, PSTI is designed to protect the consumer. It's designed to protect us from going on a website and buying insecure IoT. And it's now enforceable. So originally it received royal assent in December of 2022. April 2023 came around and they said, right, it's implemented, this is it. You've got 12 months to get to grips with it. That 12 months finished on April the 29th last year. And still, almost a year later, we find, how many manufacturers do we find? So many, don't we, that are still ignorant to their responsibilities under it, or that they bury their head in the sand and they say, actually, it doesn't apply to us. But as Jen said, it does affect the supply chain. So the little graph that you've got there is fantastic.
Too tall to stand there.
Oh, sorry. See, she's very bossy. But basically, the problem with PSTI in the supply chain is if you're a retailer and or an installer or a distributor of this IoT technology, you are just as liable as the manufacturer to make sure that it's compliant. Now, that seems really unfair at first when you think about it, because you think, I'm not making this. How is it my responsibility to make sure it's secure? But the government's thinking about it, and we've asked them this extensively so we can give you an answer to this, was that basically, they think that security is everyone's business, and that if you're going to be selling devices to customers saying, this is some CCTV for your house, this is a smart fridge, a smart washing machine, whatever it might be, that you have a responsibility to make sure that that technology is up to date and is then in line with the legislation that covers. And the next stage of that is the investigating non-compliance. We work really closely with OPSS, which stands for the Office for Product Safety and Standards. They are the enforcement body, they are the regulator of PSTI. And they've got some quite strong punitive measures available to them. So they could fine you £10 million even if you're just reselling somebody else's technology that's not secure, you are just as liable under that fine guidelines as the manufacturer. Now, £10 million sounds like a lot of money, but they can also fine you 4% of global turnover, whichever's more. So we did an experiment on this. If you look at, let's use Amazon as an example, because let's be fair, we've all heard of Amazon. So we looked at a range of products that were sold on Amazon. We looked at a range of how that would affect the manufacturing businesses that were producing these products. And we looked at one of them in particular. I'd never heard of the manufacturer before, did a really deep dive, drilled down into them. They're not listed on Companies House in the UK. They have no presence whatsoever other than through the Amazon marketplace. The only buildings that they have listed, it is a warehouse in France, which when you go on Google Earth to look at is a derelict building. And they come out of, and the product is manufactured in China. The email address for the business doesn't work, it just returns as undelivered. And the telephone number rings in China but is never answered. So they might be manufacturing that product, but how does OPSS enforce that on them when they're the ones that there's no way of getting hold of them? So by Amazon reselling that, Amazon are liable to make sure that they're only selling stuff that is appropriate and in line with legislation. So that, therefore, is an example for me how that supply chain, because it would be Amazon's name in Amazon insecure door lock, for example, allows burglary. It would be Amazon's reputation that would suffer on that basis, not the manufacturer of the lock, who nobody can get hold of anyway.
So back onto my soapbox about my pet peeve about supply chain security and why I'm talking about it. So having had this 200-page document and having now hopefully persuaded you that supply chain security is important, I then started thinking about, okay, Secarma are a penetration testing business. So for context, our customers pay us to hack into their crown jewels. You pay us to gain access, as a hacker would, to your network, your infrastructure, your databases. I'm actually really surprised at the number of organisations that check out our security credentials before they allow us to do that. And when I thought about it, it's a very small number. So
25%.
25?
I reckon 25%. Anyone else care to venture a guess? I think that's a fair enough number.
Less than 5%, would you believe, of our customers ask us anything about our security credentials before they sign a piece of paper giving us permission to hack into their business systems. That's crazy for me. And of the people that do, they send us documents that I know are not useful to them. And I want to just share a little bit of, I'd love you to leave the room with something to think about. I have quite a controversial opinion on how we should do supplier security, and I'm hoping I can share some of that with you. So, okay, where does it go wrong? It's overcomplicated. Nobody in their right mind is going to sit and read through my answers to those 200 questions and take action on any of them, or all of them, or even a few of them. Because the questions that are being asked aren't relevant in a lot of cases to the risk that I, as a supplier, pose to your organisation. They're very generic. I get overloaded with the questions, so I can't imagine how the person reading the answers to my questions is going to feel. If you think about if supplier due diligence is your job, how many answers are you going to read? How much of my waffle, there's a polite way of putting it, how much of my waffle are you going to have to sift through to get a piece of information that's useful to you? You're also dealing with a human on the other side of this. The chances of me giving you a high quality answer to question number 111 is quite low. So actually, you're unlikely to get accurate, full responses from me on a 200-question questionnaire. It's quite often we don't design these questionnaires to be proportionate to the types of supplier. So I know the supplier questionnaire I received will be the same supplier questionnaire that the facilities management company receive, and the same questionnaire that, maybe a lower grade of supplier would probably also receive. And these questionnaires, much as we have, we do have a few customers who send us the due diligence, I don't think anybody has ever asked for an update on those answers. In 5 years of us servicing a contract, I cannot think of a single organisation that came back to me in year 2 and said, is this still correct? So I want to share what I think is a better way. So first of all, you should categorise your suppliers. So by categorise, I mean group them into the types of suppliers that are high risk to the business and the types of suppliers that are low risk to the business, and design a risk assessment process that suits those needs. Do you really need to know all of the information security detail from your cleaning company? Probably not. You probably want some simple way of verifying that they're doing the basics, because that's what you need from them. Now, your payroll service, yes, you might want to ask them a few more questions, but design these supplier questionnaires to assess groups of risk. Conduct the evaluations, but then absolutely don't forget to monitor and review. Technology moves so quickly and things change in organisations. Secarma is a completely different business than what it was 4 years ago. All the directors are different. Your points of contact for information security incidents are all different. We do very different things as an organisation. We're on a different cloud platform. So make sure you come back, and even if it's just has anything material changed, or is this all still true and accurate? And use certifications to allow you to condense these questions. So I think I mentioned earlier in the campfire that we did downstairs, Secarma actually have a 10-question questionnaire that we ask of our vendors. Now, we did used to send out these awful things, and it was my job to read through them. So I thought, no, we're not going to do that. We're gonna ask for certifications, and we're going to ask for well-known standards, because that tells me what I need to know already. So using certifications is a really good way of verifying the security credentials of your suppliers without having to ask them loads of questions. Don't ask the Cyber Essentials question set, because somebody's already done that for you and issued a certificate to that business. You can also use IASME Cyber Assurance, or things like ISO 27001, ISO 9001, or we can use the wonderful IoT cyber scheme.
Yes, excellent. Great idea.
So I know you've got some examples, haven't you, could share, Jace, about organisations where they're using certificates as part of their
Yes, so
chain.
We work really closely with several different critical national infrastructure organisations who they employ lots of people, so they might use 27001 or Cyber Assurance on that basis to sort of secure that information security that they've got. However, one of the information security, I know what I meant. But one of the other things that they've started to do now is say, okay, we actually purchase in a lot of IoT. Now, there was a statistic recently, and I don't usually like statistics, but this one is 99% of businesses and homes in the UK use some form of connected device. 99%. That's an insane amount when you actually think when you think about that. So recently we were asked by one of our critical national infrastructure partners to to certify some of the devices that they were looking at using. So they've bought a new site, they want to put brand new access control into that site to make sure that it's secure from a physical security perspective. What security can they use? So actually we gave them a list of smart access control that we've certified, and that's now an example of something that they will only accept a device as part of their supply chain that actually is certified by IASME and carries the IoT Cyber Scheme certificate, because they know they've looked at the question set. And like Jen said, rather than them saying, right, well, have you got a vulnerability disclosure policy? Oh, have you also got X, Y, Z? Well, if we've got all those questions already done in a certificate for you, actually, let's just use that certificate. So now there's 2 or 3 massive critical national infrastructure partners who use the IASME IoT Cyber Certificate as a check for their supply chain to make sure that they're only implementing that secure technology.
So some tips then on how to design your questionnaire. We need to do something. We need to ask these suppliers some questions. But how do you decide what you're going to ask them? Okay, before you include anything on your supplier questionnaire, I would issue this guidance. Ask yourself, what will you do with the information? If you're not actually going to decide whether or not to trade with an organisation based on their answer, don't ask it. So actually, if an organisation who's a high-risk secure business doesn't have ISO 27001, but actually you really need them anyway, don't ask the question if you're not going to do anything with that, because that just adds to that overload and that, you're putting in requirements that you're not going to do anything with. Which links to the next one. If the responder says, no, what am I going to do? So there are going to be some situations where, that would be a blocker, in which case you definitely should ask the question. So an organisation I worked on in the past, we were in the legal sector in conveyancing, where there's loads of issues with fraud or people pretending to be somebody else and pretending to be from a law firm. So we decided that we were only going to work with other businesses who'd implemented DMARC, so that we knew that when they were sending us emails, it was from them, and that when they were receiving emails from us, they knew that was from us. This is one of my pet peeves again. If we're providing a certificate, should you ask the question? So if you've decided that ISO 27001 is a mandatory requirement for your organisation, and I get why in some cases it would be, don't then ask me to describe my risk assessment process, because it's already in that standard. Don't ask me, do my board meet regularly to discuss the following agenda items, because they definitely do, otherwise we wouldn't have the certificate. So save yourself that time and energy, and don't duplicate that information. Decide which standards or certificates you value. I know things like ISO 27001 are divisive. Some people love them, some people hate them. I see both sides. But decide what you as an organisation value. So if you value technical controls, find those standards and ask for those. If you value things like the ISO standards, ask for them. You need to decide what the impact of failure of that supplier would be. So if, let's say, they're responsible for some of your critical operations, you need to ask some more questions about their resilience as opposed to, what they're doing to prevent attacks, if that makes sense. And that's one of the shifts that we've really seen this year, is organisations are now starting to ask, what will you do when you get hacked, as opposed to how are you going to prevent yourself from being hacked. So I would include these as my basics, if you like. So know that your data is segregated from other businesses, and where is it held? You need to know that. Ask about the kind of subcontractors and the other suppliers involved in the provision of services into your organisation, so that you can understand the complete picture. I want to know, as Secarma's MD, I want to know if there's a compromise of data by one of our suppliers, who's going to tell me, and how quickly are they going to tell me, and under what circumstances are they going to tell me? That's really important to establish upfront, and that should be written into your contracts as well. The other kind of real important question for me is, can I check? So if you're telling me that you've got resilience here and you've got a backup policy which says you back everything up within, you back everything up daily, can I come and audit that? Can I come and see those records? I may never choose to, because you might be a low-risk supplier, but I want that permission written into our supplier agreements.
On that basis as well, one of the things that I think does work on the can I check bit is the IASME certificates use a technology called blockmark. So if we issue a certificate to a business, whether that's with Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, IASME Cyber Assurance, or the IoT Cyber certification, those certificates are live. So if they're embedded into email, website, You can click, anybody can go to them and click on them, and it will take you to that block mark certificate that tells you when it was issued, what time it was issued, when it expires, and the scope of that certificate. So actually, you can really easily and at a glance see how long that certificate's been valid, how long it's valid for, and actually that just adds another layer of protection into you, that you can make sure that you can check that someone's saying, oh, I've got this, okay, let me check.
So that covers my last point. Is it validated anywhere? Yeah. So lots of these kind of standards and certifications have publicly available databases where you can actually go and verify that those controls have been implemented. So if an organisation, for example, tells you, because you require them to, that they've got Cyber Essentials Plus, you can go onto IASME's website where there's a certificate search and you can enter the name of an organisation. It will validate that actually they have an active certificate there. ISO 27001 is a little bit more difficult, but through a number of different sources, you'll be able to validate that that certificate's real. What I would say is check that it's an UCAS accredited ISO 27001 certificate, because there are organisations out there who will certify businesses against ISO 27001 without being able to do so. They're not regulated to do that. And then the last one for me is, how can my business be a good supplier? So Secarma are in a really unique position where we have lots of suppliers and we are a supplier of security services to lots of customers. And for me, this is what is important to me that we do to provide a good service to our customers. So be honest, if we don't meet one of your requirements, I would rather tell you that up front than you find that out later down the line and us be in breach of contract. Be honest, if you can't get Cyber Essentials for whatever reason, tell them that. Communicate change. So I've just said Secarma is a very different business to what it was 5 years ago. Keep your customers up to date with those kind of things. And you build that sense of trust by volunteering information. Keep your certificates up to date. There's nothing worse, and nothing looks worse for a customer than you telling them that you've got Cyber Essentials Plus, and then they go and find your latest certificate, and they find that you've let it lapse. It's not a great look. Continue to improve. So whatever you do today, make sure that what you do next year is even better. So security is a really fast-moving industry. Hacking is a very fast-moving industry, and criminals find new ways every day to ruin our businesses. So you have to make sure that you're continually ahead of the curve, or as close to being up to date with the curve as you can be. So however you are today, make sure you're better tomorrow. But also really importantly for a customer, and there's nothing more frustrating than not having a dedicated point of contact for security. So make sure that when you're onboarded by a customer, give them a dedicated person that if they've got any other questions that they need to ask of you, give them a person to go to who they can reach out to. That for me is my kind of top tips on supply chain security and why I think it's important. We're starting to see so much now from our customers wanting to work on this. And I think, keep it simple for me is the message. If you're not going to do anything with the information, don't ask it. If you do want to ask any specific questions, come and see us on stand E9. We're located right next door to our friends at IASME who are on E10. And thank you very much for your time, guys. We do have 3 minutes, I believe, if anybody's got any burning, easy to answer questions.
No questions at all? No.
Oh, God. I can hear you, John.
Yeah, okay. So I think this is great, and I love you guys for what you do a great job. So this is about prevention and how you try to keep the hygiene of your organisation in the right place. Looking ahead, we have the CRA coming, which we're all looking at with anticipation and confusion. Some of the aspects which I think are interesting to me is about the reporting. So what happens when things do go wrong, and they do go wrong? Could you comment at all, give us a perspective on the obligations of organisations that have to respond, within 24 hours, and I'm also looking at the recently published CSRB, the Cybersecurity Resilience, what's the B stand for? Do you remember? Bill bill. But they've tackled it in a slightly different way. They've said you have to notify within 24 hours, but then full report in 72 hours. So could you just comment a little bit about that? And hopefully I've pitched it enough that's easy for you to answer.
Yeah. So I suppose, again, this is all about understanding the complexity of your supply chain, because, you know, you can't possibly notify the right organisations unless you've done that. Also, this for me really brings in one of my other favourite areas of cybersecurity, which is business continuity planning and disaster recovery planning and everything that goes into cyber incident exercising. Organisations that are already doing that will be in a great position to be able to report because you'll have practiced that. I had the really unfortunate position of being in an organisation when they were hit by a cyber attack, and we had not done any of that prep. I'd written all the plans, I'd decided who was going to phone who, when, where, how. All that went out the window when it was in real life. If you haven't done a live play exercise of a cyber attack in your business, do it soon, because actually businesses that do that will be in a position to meet their reporting obligations. And without that, you may think you are, and it's a really nice position to be in to think you are. Trust me, from experience, you're not. Hope that was a sufficient comment, John. Was that okay?
Yeah, it's good advice. You know, it's a bit like, you know, the IT doing the backups. You do the backups, then you need to back up. No one's tested that you can recover from the backup. So.
Thank you very much, guys. I think we're at time now, so do come and speak to us.